is John Mugno, and I'm a Rye Brook resident, and I'm going to be your host today on Rye Brook Focus. This is a new program we've inaugurated to interview people who are important to the village and who are going to address a specific topic of interest to people who live in the village. Our guests today are Alice Schoen and Dana Colasante. They are two Rye Brook residents who have been instrumental in the AED program throughout the village. Welcome, Alice and Dana.
Thank you.
Hi.
Well, we can just get started. Tell me a little bit about yourselves and how you became interested in this issue.
So I'll start. Dana and I we were acquaintances up until 3 or so years ago. Both of our boys are in school together. And what brought us together was our families both experienced a sudden cardiac arrest. Dana could share more about her story, but her husband had a sudden cardiac arrest while playing in a youth father soccer program or game. My son had a cardiac arrest on a basketball court during a varsity basketball game. And thankfully, both survived. But it was really this experience in our lives that brought us together.
Right. And so from there, we knew each other just as acquaintances. And then when Alice's son, my husband had his sudden cardiac arrest in 2013, playing on the King Street soccer field with my son's soccer team. He was one of the assistant coaches. And then he survived, thankfully. And after Alice's son had hers, I had reached out to her just from a support standpoint to see, if she needed any advice, doctor recommendations. And she took a couple weeks to get back to me. But when she did, she was like, there's a problem here. There's safety lacking in youth sports. I need to do something about it. Are you with me? And from there on, we partnered together to advocate for cardiac safety in youth athletic programs. That's basically our focus, because after doing research, we found that there are no protections in place as far as requirements for CPR training or AEDs or automatic external defibrillators on the field. And, we felt like these were important things that were necessary to save a life in a cardiac emergency. So we started from there. And that first step was working with the village of Rye Brook to develop a cardiac emergency response plan with their rec department and the town at large.
Yeah, well, I think that to me is a key point. There were already some of these AEDs around the village. There could be a few more added, but really what you two started in to do is to develop a training program and a structure around the use of AEDs, especially with relating to sports. And tell us about how you did that and what decisions you made.
Well, I think it really started by asking questions, because the more I learned that there are certain safeguards in place within a school setting. For example, coaches within a school system need to know CPR. But really, when you step outside of the school setting, it was like, well, who's going to protect our kids during rec programs? And once we started asking these questions, like we just all assumed that game officials knew CPR, and we then learned that game officials do not know CPR and they're not mandated to know CPR. So we really started asking those questions and wanted to see how we could change the answer. So one of the thoughts that we had, and we approached the village and they were tremendously supportive, is that we have our rec programs and we have all these wonderful volunteers wanting to coach, and we started to talk of the conversation and asking that all of our volunteer coaches have to take a CPR class in order for them to coach within our village. And I think that was the turning point in the conversations, and be like, oh, okay, that all makes sense. Or going around to where the defibrillators are and realizing that there may be a defibrillator in one area, but you actually don't know where they are because there isn't any signage in the other area. So that was also a part of the questions that we asked, and like, how do you know there's a defibrillator there? So it all started in just asking questions and engaging with people in the community just to find out the answers and see how we could improve on those answers.
Right, and the village administration, Chris Bradbury, were extremely supportive.
Yes.
And we did our research and went to the American Heart Association, and we came up with a plan with Chris and, EMS, the local EMS and police department that would make sense for an effective cardiac emergency response plan. And that, included initially, establishing a team of people throughout the community that would meet regularly. Like Alice said, we made sure that there was enough, the recommendation is that an AED should be within 3 minutes of a person when they collapse. So we found some gaps in the village, and they were added, for instance, at the Harkness Park near the tennis courts that are by the high school. We added signage throughout the field, and then the town made the commitment to requiring all volunteer coaches be CPR trained and certified, and the town is paying for that certification. And on top of that, we were able to get, in addition to the rec department, we have some private sports leagues in the town. So the youth travel soccer league and the travel baseball league came on board, and they're requiring their coaches to be CPR trained.
So, and also, I was going to say, so also, when we spent a lot of time with Chris and Bert in the rec program, and our EMS, Scott Moore and Ken Barton, and there was a lot of discussion, and we realized that we need sort of to formalize our thoughts. And what Chris did is he did a lot of research and realized that there are examples of a cardiac emergency response plan for schools, and there are templates out there and examples. And what Chris did then is took those examples and all of our thoughts and ideas and really formalized this plan and what is known as our cardiac emergency response plan, which is a document. It's on the website. I know that you have it in front of you. So once we really got that formalized, it was like, wow, like we were really onto something. And the village board was extremely supportive. They still are. So it really was just wonderful collaborated effort of everyone involved.
Right. And I think were game officials required to take the training as well?
No.
Yes.
No. The coaches, because it's our understanding that the game officials, I believe, come from an outside organization, that they come in and referee our rec programs. So that wasn't something we necessarily could mandate, but we could certainly mandate that our volunteer coaches are certified in CPR. So we know that there is some protection on the field in case there is an instance of a cardiac arrest.
So at every athletic event, then, there are at least 2 people who've been trained in what to do.
That is the intention.
That is the intention.
And
you only need at least 2 people, because in case of, if one person goes down, you need somebody else.
Right. No. And also at the beginning of before the game starts, I understand the coaches get together and there's a decision made about who's going to do what if there's a problem. So they've allocated roles so people know what's expected of them if there's an event.
So that is new to the efforts here. And what it is, it's called a pre-event medical review. And, before each of the games anyway, the coaches from each team meet, they go over the game rules. So what this effort is, in addition to those conversations, is to really talk about, I have it in front of me, just a coordinated effort in that who's going to call 911, where is the AED, look around, make sure people know where it is, who is going to perform CPR, and also where is the first aid kit. So it's this conversation to have couple of minutes before the game, so there isn't any questions in the middle of a game, in case somebody had a cardiac arrest.
Right, so there's no delay in reacting. Because in addition to having all the right training and equipment, you want to make sure people react quickly, because again, the key is getting to a victim within 3 minutes.
that the training of the coaches started about 3 years ago. So
Yeah.
it seems to me then that one of the things you're going to achieve is having a group of people, some of whom are still coaching, some of whom were coaching, who will know what to do if there's a sudden cardiac event on a playing field, which means you could have better coverage.
Well, absolutely. But what we're going through now actually is the certification is good for 2 years. So what we're looking to do now is recertifying all the new coaches that are coming up, especially for the fall. So they're going to be going through the program, and it's the coaches are trained by our local EMS.
But even if the coach is a former coach who isn't recertified, at least you have another knowledge.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely, 100%, absolutely.
Okay. And as I say, in the 3 or so years this whole program has been established, have there been any incidents that was required?
Thank God, no.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Good.
The hope is that it's never going to happen again, but I want to be prepared.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, now Alice, you're a member of the Cardiac Emergency Response Review Team, which meets semi-annually typically.
Mhm.
In the 3 years that the program has been in place, has the team recommended any changes to the program?
No, I don't know, changes, more enhancements. We didn't meet during COVID, but we actually just met a couple of months ago. And that's when we had the conversation about adding the pre-event medical review to each of the games. So that was an enhancement to the program.
Right.
And it's just needing to make sure that we stay on top of all the requirements within the cardiac emergency response plan as far as training and AEDs are maintained, and talk about ideas of spreading more awareness within the community.
Yes.
Yeah. And the committee involves people like from EMS services, police services, fire and whatnot. So you have all the people in the community who are knowledgeable about the problem looking at this twice a year.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Good. Now, I understand that Rye Brook is the only municipality in southern Westchester that has a plan for responding to sudden cardiac arrest.
Yes,
That's
yes, that is correct. Actually, when we talked about formalizing all the conversations we had, Chris Bradbury reached out, it's our understanding, reached out to his colleagues within the community, within Westchester County. And he realized actually that this was the first, we were the first to come up with something like this. And we are definitely looking to get the word out and to try and change that statistic that Rye Brook be the only one. So
Right. Yeah, part of our mission is sharing this cardiac emergency response plans with other towns and communities within Westchester.
Do you have any idea why other communities are not taking it up? It seems like such a good idea.
I think it's just because they don't know. We don't, not thinking about it. I don't think it's for any other reason,
Right.
really. I think it's awareness. I
Right.
think that's the key, is really just awareness.
And I think until you experience it,
Correct.
you don't realize the protections that aren't there. You just assume, right, that there's an AED or, people know CPR or even if you don't know if that's the proper requirement, you assume those protocols are there. And unfortunately, until it happens to you, that's when you kind of realize. And that's really when, we've been in many scenarios where we say, oh, I'm assuming this community center or that place has an AED, and they don't. And so we've learned not to assume anything. And I think it's just awareness and people not realizing that these protocols aren't in place. So that's kind of what our message is and what we're trying to get out to the community at large in Westchester and the state. I mean, we're actually, we're working on, besides the town, we've talked a lot to our local legislators just on creating more requirements or within the communities, or we learned recently that camps are not like day camps for children in New York State are not required to have AEDs on site. Those were one of those things that just came up in a meeting recently that we just assumed was happening. They're required to have a certain amount of staff trained in CPR, which recognizes the need for being prepared for a cardiac emergency, but they're not required to have an AED. And that is something that we are working with local legislation to change. That's
Yes.
another part of our advocacy efforts for the community and the state.
Right. Well, thank you very much. This is an excellent effort, and we're happy to hear your story of how it came
Mhm.
about. You know, it's one thing to have an idea, it's one thing to have the equipment, but if you don't put a process around making sure people know what to do when an
Right.
event occurs, it's not that effective.
Right.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank you.
reaching out to us and hearing our story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.